Sorry. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special Board of Education meeting on Wednesday, January 13th. We are going to start this meeting with the call to order and a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we have just one item on the agenda tonight. It's the 2021 to 2022 proposed budget presentations. We're going to hear from the elementary schools, secondary principals, curriculum and instruction, special education, district-wide non-instructional programs and athletics, site and building, capital requests, and Board of Education overall review. So I will now turn the meeting over to the elementary school principals, unless Superintendent Benigni has anything he'd like to add.
Just before we begin tonight, I just think it's important to note that in the preparation by all the administrators, looking at the budget, there were a lot more requests that were funded, and asking them to present to you this evening. They're prepared to share with you what the initial request was, and then where things are as of right now. So with that, I'm going to turn over to the elementary principals.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you, Superintendent Benigni. Happy New Year. My name is Megan Sorois, and I'm the principal of Willard School. Mr. Kitzman.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for hosting us. I'm David Kitzman, principal at Griswold Elementary School.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Hope everybody had a great winter break. Al Souza, principal of Hubbard Elementary School.
The elementary budgets we are presenting to you this evening are similar to the budgets that were proposed for each of the 3 elementary schools last year. They were created to adequately support the needs of each individual school. The current fiscal circumstances were also taken into consideration, and therefore our budgets reflect a minimal increase or flat increases based on needs. Ultimately, the budget reflects an effort to maintain what we currently have. Back. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Meg.
So our goals are in place across the district, including our elementary schools. These are the drivers behind our decision making for the budget. So across the district, we want to create learning experiences that are engaging for our students and promote a sense of purpose, ignite passion, and foster pride. Consideration was given to the support of the whole child, including academics, social emotional needs, as well as developmental needs of all of our learners in grades pre-K through 5. In order for students to fulfill their potential, we need to provide necessary resources, instructional resources to actualize that. And building safety is always a driver. It's paramount that we keep students and staff safe at all times. So you will hear that reflected in some of the proposals tonight. So our budget is also in alignment with Superintendent Benigni's budget rationale, as that it does not assume the current COVID precautions. So Mr. Souza, over to you.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to touch upon some of our requests, and those still included in the budget involving staffing. As you know, in Board of Education, a primary driver is human capital. Just to reiterate what Meg had mentioned, we absolutely considered the current context as well as that balance of advocacy for our schools individually and collectively. What you see here as far as elementary staffing, on the right-hand side, you see some of the core positions that were requested, and on that left-hand side, what's still currently included. So on that right-hand side, you see the 0.3 reading teacher for Griswold and Willard. That's Griswold and Willard asking for an incremental increase in their 0.5 reading teachers to bolster support for Tier 2 and Tier 3 remedial services as such for their student populations. The writing interventionist, that was requested by all 3 schools. And really, we do not have any tier 2 or tier 3 intervention in writing by design. We do have our literacy department getting creative to support those pieces, but our primary intervention, instruction, and remediation happens in tier 1. So we currently do not have staffing for our writing interventionists. That was requested, has been in the past as well. The 0.6 art teacher and the 0.5 social worker you have for Hubbard just is a little bit of a nuanced request. Right now, the art teacher for Hubbard School, it's shared between 2 of the other schools. That 0.6 would allow 1 art teacher to work part-time at Hubbard and the other schools maintain the continuity of their existing art staff. The 0.5 social worker, as you could so derive, is really our work with families. Hubbard's fortunate enough to have a school psychologist. Willard and Griswold does have some social work support as well. So this is Hubbard's request in that area, just to get some social work support at the school. On the left-hand side, you see that math interventionist, and parallel to what Superintendent Benigni indicated during his presentation, that asterisk there indicates possible option for choice funds. And one possible option is funding positions. At the elementary level, that math interventionist for all the schools still remains. At Griswold and at Willard, that's an increase of a 1.0. So 1 more math interventionist at Griswold, 1 more at Willard. Hubbard has a 0.7 math specialist and is looking for a 0.3 increase. So just to sum it up briefly, Griswold would have a math specialist, a paraprofessional, and an interventionist, as would Willard, and Hubbard would have a full-time math specialist and a paraprofessional if the request was filled. Thank you.
Okay, I'm up next. Thank you, Mr. Souza. I'm going to talk about the elementary equipment and facility request. This first slide represents the common request between the 3 schools, and we've highlighted the items that have been included in Superintendent Benigni's proposal to the Board of Education. So I'll start with those. First, we have the emergency alert lights. We are looking to update our emergency alert system to include lights. This is for our hearing impaired students. It's also to increase safety and awareness of when there is an emergency procedure in place. Next, we are looking at tile replacement. Many of the tiles in our buildings are maybe original tiles, and in some cases they're in need of repair. For example, at Griswold School, I gave a tour to a lot of the Board of Ed members last year. When it gets humid, some of the tiles rise, which is causing it difficult for doors to close, including emergency doors. And then finally, we have painting. The painting is just for routine maintenance and upkeep of the classrooms and learning spaces. The items that we requested that were not included in the proposed budget included Juno surround sound system. I'll describe what that is for those of you who don't know. The Juno surround sound is an audio system that projects the teacher's voice in the classroom to boost listening, to boost participation, confidence, and comprehension. We do have these in some classrooms where there are students who are identified with hearing impairments, but we'd like to have them in all classrooms. Next, we would like to upgrade the lavatories. That was also included in our tour for the members who were present last year. You saw that a lot of the facilities at the schools are original sinks, urinals, other fixtures, and we would like to upkeep those. Last year, we were able to get a deep clean of them, which helped greatly, but we are in need of some upgrades in there. And finally, we have the office millwork. We're very fortunate to have the vestibules that we have at all 3 schools, at all 5 schools. They've greatly increased the safety of our students and staff and are functioning just wonderfully. However, our office was not created to support the vestibules. And so we'd like to rearrange the office millwork so that it's more compatible with the vestibules. As Mr. Souza said, we are well aware of the state of our budget, and we understand why some of these are being considered and some are not, and we appreciate your support. On the next slide.
Are you taking questions during the presentation? You want
Sure,
us to
absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Salino.
If you, thank you. If you just go back 1 slide, because I know this was a question, Brian, during one of our previous meetings with regard to the emergency lights and a question of what that meant, because I think originally it was like $225,000 per school or something like that. Can we just be clear on what the emergency alert lights are? And I know I don't believe there's a cost associated with it in our budget books.
I'm going to ask Jeff if you could answer that question, Mr. Cugno.
Evening, folks. We've not yet costed all of that out. You're correct, Adam. There was a rather large dollar amount put in on the initial requests, which didn't seem to pan out. We don't have a new estimate yet. We've asked for a review of this and exactly what is going to entail and how much it may cost. We know it's important. It has to do with if in fact there is an issue at the schools, that the lights blink and direct people and so on and so forth, and it's supposed to be a nice system, but we don't have anything fine tuned on that on exactly what it would cost.
So these would be lights that are not currently included as part of the fire suppression or fire alarms.
Correct.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So these are like strobe lights in the hallways and in the classrooms, or what exactly is it?
I haven't seen a complete layout of it. I understand that it does include that type of a lighting for an emergency escape for the building and directional lights and things of that nature.
Now, the lights that are, excuse me, Mr. Cugno. The lights, Brian being the superintendent, the lights that are currently in the building, we have emergency lights in the building that would go on should there be a lack of power. These lights are for when there is a fire drill or an emergency that would go on, and with the alarm to allow both the visual and the hearing portion of it. So they have to be integrated into the system. So it is a large overhaul.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Guys, I apologize. Board member Steve Jenkins here, and I appreciate that we can ask questions during the presentation. I wanted to back up a few slides ago, and you don't have to move the slides, but I thought I heard you say that there's a full-time psychologist at Griswold and some social support at the other two elementary schools. And is that accurate? First off, I guess, Brian?
Yes, Brian being the superintendent. Last year, we added a social worker to both Willard and to Griswold. We did not add a social worker to Hubbard, not because there wasn't a need, because we do have a psychologist that is full-time for the most part. I mean, at Hubbard.
And my question would be, do we have a similar level of services being provided to the students across the board at all three schools, given that we have a psychologist full-time at one and not the other two? So is there a disparity in services being offered and available to our students depending on what school they go to?
Well, we have a full-time school psychologist at all of our schools, Steve.
Oh, thank you.
This is Linda Holian. We actually have two at McGee, and every other school has a full-time school psychologist. They were getting, between all the testing that they had to do and then all the social emotional concerns that have been coming up, that's when we requested last year to get more support. So the social workers don't do any evaluations on students other than risk assessments. So the two social workers that are at Willard and Griswold now have been instrumental in providing supports not only to students with special education needs, but general ed.
So Linda, Brian being the superintendent, if you could speak to, so we have a psychologist at Willard with roughly 500 students. We have a psychologist at Hubbard with roughly 200 students. So the average number of tests that take place at Willard compared to Hubbard based on numbers, just to give it a perspective of why, even though it's a school of 200, we have a full-time psychologist, how they're meeting the needs of the students with the social emotional piece. If you could speak to that, Linda, that'd be great.
Well, our school psychologist at Hubbard is also helping out with testing at the high school. So her primary place of work is at Hubbard. So she has a caseload of students at Hubbard. She has a testing caseload at Hubbard. But because we only have one school psychologist at the high school, I asked Liz to take on a lot of the evaluations at the high school too. So she is pulled away from Hubbard at times to go do evaluations.
Thank you.
Okay, Thank you for those questions. Finally, we have elementary equipment and facility requests that were unique to the three schools. I'll begin with Griswold School. And again, the highlighted items are items that have been included in the superintendent's proposed budget. They include a band classroom at Griswold School. We currently have an instrumental music and band teacher who is using a stage as her classroom, and she's sharing that with the PE. And for instrumental lessons, she's using an office space, but we would like to provide for that portion of our building an actual classroom. And so that's been requested. At Hubbard School, they're looking at closet cubbies for classrooms for storage and organization of student supplies and materials. There's also a skylight at the library at Hubbard School that is leaking. And so we've included that into the budget as well. And then at Willard School, the lower parking lot does not have lights. And, you know, obviously, as it is getting dark at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that's imperative for safety reasons. And as well, Willard is looking for playground updates. The only item in our unique list here that was not included into the budget is a renovation of the health room at Griswold School. This year, all of our health rooms have really been put to the test. And what we've learned at Griswold School is there's not adequate space for confidentiality or the separation of students to stop the spread of illness in our current health room. We are making it work, and our health room staff is doing an amazing job, but that was something that we wanted to request as well.
Thanks, Dave.
Welcome.
And just to close out, one of the primary budget responsibilities falls at our buildings, and that's our operational budget. In alignment with Mr. Benigni, our requests were really based on maintaining what we have. You'll see a relatively flat request right around that 0 increase. And our budgets, the operational piece, involve the instructional supplies, the non-instructional supplies and equipment, textbooks, software and tech. Much of that has been moved to a separate line item through IT and central office. There may be some minor pieces requested in there for tech support, and then our maintenance and repair. Overall, again, we would try to be very responsible and taking into account the current financial and pandemic context, but also wanted to put forth a measure of advocacy for our buildings collectively and individually, so people got an accurate read on where we were at with things. Thank you, and appreciate your support. And if you have any further questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
This is Adam Selena, board member again. Dave, you mentioned the band classroom. So, and believe me, I remember the utilization of the stage, and I am embarrassed that that's our music band room. You have a room available to make dedicated for band?
Thanks, Adam. Not at this time. I've talked to Mr. Kugno about this on a few occasions, and we looked at different options that we might have. And that ranged from, you know, a portable classroom to trying to renovate some current space that we have. But we are using all of our space right now, especially with our COVID precautions. You know, we've spread people out as much as possible and have tried to minimize the cohorts. So we're using all of our classrooms right now, but that doesn't mean that there isn't, you know, as was said earlier on, we made these plans with the understanding, you know, we made this budget without COVID precautions in mind. And so I believe that we could put something together, whether it be renovating a room or looking at an alternative space.
Okay, because I know obviously having my kids going through there, you know, the practicing in the hallways and any other, you know, available spaces is not always the most conducive. So, you know, be happy to see something be renovated or something else done for them. All right, thank you.
Thank you, elementary principals.
So now we'll move to the secondary principals budget presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julia. This is Sal Urso, principal of McGee Middle School. I'm also here with my two colleagues. We'll start with our assistant principal. He can introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm Tim Cheverini. I'm the assistant principal at McGee.
And we are lucky enough to have a lead teacher this year, and she'll introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Karen Daypray. Happy New Year. I'm the lead teacher at McGee.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll start with our budget goals. There are some vocabulary in there that should be highlighted. Of course, we put together our budget with the idea of developing and delivering engaging learning experiences in a building that's safe, secure, and an environment which is also motivating. We certainly believe that this promotes positive relationships, happy community members ready for feedback, and of course, those lead to increases in performance and achievement. So starting, let's go back. We're going to start with a request that we had that is also in the superintendent's budget. And it's a 1.0 paraprofessional. I did include some pictures and I'll explain the pictures in there. This person was doing some clerical work a few years ago. We did have a third person in the office. This is right around the time or before the time we had Raptor for security, which is the measures where if vendors come in or parents come in, we use that system to make sure that they are safely entered into the building. Substitute assignments in the morning, the beginning of the day, end of the day. They're servicing, there's 2 people in there currently servicing about 730 students and staff live. If we do have an absence like the other day, we have 1 person servicing 730 students and staff in the building. The beginning of the day, end of the day gets to be a little bit hectic. And of course, those 730 students and staff have people, parents or others that may be calling to the school. So what I've done here, just to sort of highlight and show you the need, the white arrows indicate the 2 staff members, and the red, green, and yellow arrows sort of indicate what's an emergency, what's an intermediate priority, and what might be something that can wait. So we have our secretary on the phone. At any time, she could be taking a restraining order from a parent. It might need dispatch to talk to a administrator to make sure that students are safely in the building. You might have a student out here that has come in that is reacting to a peanut allergy and needs to see the nurse. At the same time, you have a teacher who needs protective equipment or some wipes. You might have another student in here that is her Chromebook has failed and she's looking for help there. And then I don't necessarily know that I would call this green, but a student who's reporting a bus conflict or needs a copy or something like that. Well, at the same time, there could be a parent at the door trying to get in where the secretary has to get that door open. And a vendor is waiting outside in the vestibule to get their Raptor and security pass checked. So we're happy that that is in the budget. Next slide. Okay, we'll go to some of the equipment and the facility. First, we'll go to the equipment and the facility. These are not in the budget. However, these were requested. So you can see here, these are science labs. You have some cracked countertops here. You have some damage to the cabinets. These are the original 1969 classrooms. What we'd like to do, since they need to be renovated anyway, and I did share with the board, not necessarily all the board members that have currently been elected, but I know the board has some documents that I sent out. The idea is to take the science rooms that need to be updated and renovated and move them upstairs. That would require some demolition, some plumbing, some cabinets, storage, whiteboards, countertops, furnishings, all of that. We would convert the current, we have 3 science rooms. We would convert them to world language rooms. And we only really need 2 of those science rooms that would go upstairs to a bigger location. So this is really making the school, the idea is to do it right. If we move the science rooms upstairs, we have a shared prep room, which currently 6th grade or 7th grade does not have a shared prep room. The other grades do. And it aligns with a middle school facility flooring plan where you keep the newest members of the school together upstairs. Okay, the band and the chorus rooms, we're lucky enough to have a band and a chorus room. I know Griswold School doesn't, so hopefully that's something that can get funded as well. But our band and chorus rooms, a few things we're looking at, they're really the 1969 versions of band and chorus rooms. We're asking for an instrument locking storage shelving unit. This is a picture of the current shelving unit, which is from 1969. It's a little bit worn out. It's a lot worn out. There isn't really a locking storage system. So we're looking to get one there to hold the large instruments. And of course, we want it secured as those instruments are expensive. We are lucky enough to have a couple of practice rooms for small group instruction. If students go in there, unfortunately, they go in unsupervised. And we're looking to have some windows cut in so that the band teacher or instrumental music teacher can have students working in breakout rooms and practicing, and they would be visible and supervised. Acoustic tiles. Just last year, we started with a blast program, which is across the hall. And those are our most needy students, and they can be distracted by the sounds of learning to play a musical instrument. Even when the door is closed, they can actually hear across the hallway. So to get acoustic tiles up in that space would be something that would not only benefit the sound in the band room, but also outside the band room. The auditorium is the original 1969 setup there. Before the renovation to Berlin High School, McGee was the site of district meetings. All musicals, whether they were McGee, Berlin High School, Berlin Repertory Theater, it was rented out for events. It was the site of district meetings. And it really is time to upgrade in there. I know we have a nice space at the high school for sure, and those high school students deserve it. The auditorium does need a little bit of work in there. You can see there's an example of some of the seats. Some of the seats are missing. It holds about 550 students, and a reupholstery job in there. Some of the curtains are ripped, some of them, the rigging, and some of that updated lighting, perhaps to some LED, which is a little bit more friendly when it comes to power as well. That was not funded. As far as the funding we have, really the final piece to the most complete and up-to-date modern space at McGee is our Library Media Center, which happens to be the site a lot of times when if we want to hold a district training or PD, this is really a great place to be. The furnishings are new, the rug is new. It's just a really, probably the space we're most proud of. If you look at the lighting there, that's lighting from the 1995 renovation. And that's something that is in the superintendent's request to upgrade that lighting. Okay, the operational budget, just a sort of a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you look at the two top pictures up here, or the top 8, that has to do with instructional materials. You see textbooks, consumables, library books. You know, we need markers and notebooks, and paper every month has to be replenished. Office supplies, if you're looking at, say, the exploratories, STEAM, we have 3D printers, and they need the nylon lines that feed the printers. In the band area, we need to maintain and purchase new instruments. This is a picture from the art room, which happens to have, there's clay there, there's paint, you have your kiln that needs to be maintained, and of course, physical education gear. Down on the bottom, you have maybe non-instructional supplies here. So you might have some whiteboards. Of course, students learn visually. That's a cutting board. That's just something for paper. That alone is $500. We have a $4,000 printer maker, poster maker, which supports visuals in the classroom, and it takes a lot of ink, and certainly, visuals for students are important. There's a laminating machine. And then there's, of course, as I explained earlier, you want to be in a motivating building. The building is really 1969 sort of design. So, here you have a $500 banner that looks nice when you come in. There's a decal. We put some rugs in. It's about $5,000 worth of rugs. You have papers for bulletin boards. And then this just explains what the instructional supplies are, the non-instructional supplies, textbooks, and of course, maintenance and repair. It should be noted really that, our request to the operational budget, it is really, 87% of what we asked last year. So we're actually in the superintendent's budget getting less than we did last year. I know we're down about 35 students or so. So it is a few less students, but it is 87% that we're asking of the last year. Since I've been in the building, we are down 100 students. It's been 7 years. It's a 38% decrease in operational budget with a 12% decrease in population. So I think this is a reasonable proposal for the middle school. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Urso.
Okay, now we'll move on to the curriculum and instruction budget, if there are no questions. Oh,
You still have the high school.
oh, I'm sorry. It was
That's
that
okay.
one clause, sorry.
Can't leave out the high school. Can't leave out the high school.
Let me just get
The high
my
school doesn't
PowerPoint.
need anything, let's move something. All right, we'll turn it over to Mrs. Eustace.
Okay. Whoop. Sorry. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. So the budget that, our operational budget that we're presenting tonight is basically a flat budget from last year. And with that, we are looking to support the published Board of Ed goals. And obviously our goals are similar to elementary and middle school as well as those in the superintendent's budget. I think one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Berlin High School is our breadth of programming. And that's one of the things that I want to emphasize in terms of being able to maintain our budget when it comes to our current staffing as well as our programmatic needs. So we really feel as though coming in with a flat budget is really important to maintain that programming. I know sometimes people can look at scheduling and see, oh, some classes are really small, but then there are others that might be larger. But when you start to just only crunch the numbers, it can significantly impact some of our very specialized programs. And again, we feel that that is very important in addition to appropriate class sizes. So just looking at the goals, we want to maintain our breadth of course offerings as we talk about meeting the individual needs of students, including as well as their interests, so that they can develop personalized pathways. We want to continue to support our students' social emotional learning. We know, particularly during the pandemic, and I think for, a few years out of this, there are students that are going to need a critical amount of support. We've been very fortunate to regain one of our school counseling positions and have a really wonderful support staff for our students. We also have some academic support programs that are built within departments that if we do have to take a look at some of the staffing, some of those academic supports could potentially go away for students. But again, our current staffing for in-school counseling, as well as our social workers, school psychologists, they, as well as our other programs that we run within the school, are truly instrumental for supporting our students and helping them find success. Finally, just the idea of the flexible use of resources and opportunities for exploring students. We really want to provide high-level learning experiences that, again, create that sense of purpose, ignite passion, and foster a sense of pride for our students, and continue to push our innovative practices. So with that in mind, in terms of staffing, we have been fortunate that we have been able to maintain staff over the last couple of years. We did have an addition of a world language teacher last year, which was instrumental in building reasonable class sizes. It also is helping to support our new graduation requirements that continue to roll up, that began with the class of 2023. So we are now, those students will be juniors next year. So we have to continue to meet the needs of those graduation requirements. So one of the positions that I did request is a tier 2 intervention tutor, which Superintendent Benigni mentioned could possibly come from the choice funds. We are concerned about the fallout from a lot of the remote learning, the hybrid learning, the pandemic, the social emotional support, and just making sure that we can provide appropriate academic support for students that may not necessarily be identified through an IEP or 504. We have some students that truly do struggle with organizational skills, perhaps, completing work outside of school, just due to other types of constraints. And we really do feel as though a tier 2 intervention tutor would really help support our number of at-risk students that don't currently receive specialized services. And then highlighted in yellow, basically because it is at this point still in the current budget, is that we want to maintain our current level of staffing in all areas for social emotional supports as well as our academic programming. As far as equipment and facility, I do feel very fortunate. We have a beautiful building. We have a lot of amazing resources. We do have two of the things that are not highlighted. Those are things that are currently not in the budget. We do need to do some replacement of cafeteria seating. Some of the benches need replacement. And we are going to continue to request the flexible seating for the classroom. I know through our building tour that some of you can see some of the challenges based on the current furniture. And while I understand that it is new, it does place a few restrictions on us in terms of number of students that we can have in the classroom, as well as some of the flexibility for particular classroom teachers in terms of grouping students, the way in which they can work together, just even being able to walk around the classroom. When you have all the furniture and all the students in the classroom, it's very difficult to get around in some of our smaller classrooms. As far as what's currently included in the budget, we continue to take a look at our tech support services. I know some of the things mentioned here in terms of supporting the radio station, but just the continued repair and maintenance of TV, radio station, auditorium, increased dues and fees just across the board, as well as miscellaneous instructional equipment in those areas. While the equipment is still relatively new, we have found that as we can all know with technology, things turn over pretty quickly in the technological world. They need upgrading and continued maintenance, and it's really important for us to make sure that we have funding to stay ahead of that. As far as our building operation and instruction, again, we are basically offering flat staff, or not flat staffing, but just flat requests in terms of materials. And a few of the things that there are some things there we had initially put in for a little bit of an increase in some of the areas that we want to make sure that we continue to be cognizant of. As we continue to use various types of software, we're moving away from hard textbooks and using different types of software to support students. Licensing is different. A hard textbook you can hold on to 10, 12 years, potentially stretch it depending on the content area. But software licenses don't necessarily have that long of a shelf life. So some licenses are renewed more frequently. We have, through the use of our one-to-one with the Chromebooks, and as we're finding through our remote teaching as well as hybrid teaching, that we have benefited from a lot of software. So whether we're in person or remote, that software use will continue to be used for students so that we can provide them with some really high-level programming. Again, continuing to build our library media resources so that it would be at the state recommended level, and our online text subscriptions. The other thing too is the overall increased cost of supplies and consumables. So things in terms of building installations through our art program, the supplies that we need continually to run our science labs, office supplies, copy paper, health office supplies. If you think about the cost of your groceries, so when we're funding foods for family and consumer science, there always is a little bit of an increase from year to year. And while it is somewhat dependent on enrollment, there are some areas that do continue to grow in terms of enrollment in those particular classes. Budgeting for department-specific equipment and maintenance and repairs, we will continue we were able to get those line items in over the last few years. Again, through the renovation, we were able to acquire amazing equipment to use. If you think about the pottery equipment, the things that we use in the family and consumer science cooking room, the science labs. But one of the things that we do have to be cognizant of is the continued repair and maintenance of those things. So I do feel as though asking for, although projections show we might be down about 25 students, that is not a large number of students to incur a decrease in terms of staffing, as well as our instructional supplies, so that we can continue to offer the high level programming and the breadth of programs that we offer. So I will stop share.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Right, so now we will move to curriculum instruction budget. So I believe I am turning this over to Dr. McGurk. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Erin McGurk. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. I'm going to take you through the account requests for the curriculum and instruction budget. And first of all, I just want to say, following the elementary principals, the middle school principal, and the high school principal, all of them spoke to the ways in which the school district works to create engaging, powerful learning experiences for students. And I believe that the curriculum budget is the work that sort of undergirds those efforts on a district level. The accounts that you see in front of you are all accounts that serve the entire school system. And I'm going to take you through what they do and explain some of the variances. So for curriculum instruction, instructional supplies, the instructional supplies in my budget really serve as a source for needs that arise during the school year. So the principals, to the best of their ability, have documented the needs that they believe they have right now for the upcoming school year. But in our work in curriculum instruction, it's often the case that as we do curriculum revision projects, as teachers go out to professional learning, as teachers want to try new things in their classrooms, that there's a need for instructional supplies that were not budgeted for previously. So the funds in that account serve to sort of meet those gaps between the school budgets and the ongoing needs throughout the year. The other certified salaries in my department just falls for curriculum writing, and you'll see that this account is up quite a bit this year. We took a significant hit last year. We went from $65,000 in the 1920 school budget down to $42,000 last year. And that really caused us to stretch ourselves when we were trying to figure out which curriculum writing projects we could fund last summer. Due to the COVID situation, and in addition to changes in curriculum and changes in standards, we find ourselves in the situation where every year there are curriculum projects that need to be done. Some of them relate to the ongoing work of maintaining a viable curriculum, and some of them are related to new courses, and some of them are projects that we anticipate. So for example, in the upcoming school year, we anticipate that we will want to do revision related to the work of the Equity and Social Justice Committee that you put forward in October. The teaching and learning software account, you'll see is up 11%. You'll see that I actually requested $125,000. The superintendent approved it at $97,000. The teaching and learning software is, I think Eileen just mentioned, the challenges and opportunities that come with educational software. We have found during the pandemic that teachers are using many more software applications And students are benefiting from the opportunity to participate with software that they find engaging and that supports the curriculum. At the same time, those costs are often recurring costs, license subscriptions that must be renewed each year. So in the software package for teaching and learning are things like our Schoology, our Seesaw, our curriculum management software, the Atlas system, and software that supports day-to-day instruction in the classroom. The next line account, which has stayed flat, the next two that have stayed flat are for our in-district professional learning and out-of-district professional learning. So for those of you who are new to the board, we do a lot of professional learning in-house by making use of our professional learning days and bringing outside presenters and using our own staff members to provide learning opportunities for our staff. We do send staff members and educators out to outside professional learning conferences. There are sometimes opportunities that are available in other parts of Connecticut or in the local area that are important learning opportunities. So for example, when we put the virtual learning, the virtual learning room in place at the high school, we didn't already have in-house experts in virtual learning opportunities. So we needed to send teachers out to get that experience and to be able to bring it back to support the learning of other staff members. I'm going to slide down. The rest of the accounts don't have major changes down to textbooks. Textbooks is one of those accounts that sort of swings back and forth year to year, depending on what is needed in a particular year. This particular year, we have online subscriptions that have come up for Spanish, for physics, and for UConn chemistry. We've also had a request from the high school for new math texts for geometry and for algebra 2. And we have AP/ECE bio courses, biology texts where the update is required by UConn. So UConn, in order to have us offer UConn credit for the courses, makes some demands on us in terms of making sure that the textbook that we use is up to date and relevant and in line with what would be used at the university level. That is it. So I will say, if you look across the 5-year picture here, 5 years ago, the department budget was $660,000. Even with the increase that I've asked for and that Brian has supported this year, the curriculum instruction budget is roughly 2/3 of what it was back in 17-18. So we've done a lot of good work. There's a lot of good work still to come. We are really grateful for the efforts of the Board of Education and of the town and community for supporting the work that's done. And we anticipate a lot of good work moving forward.
Are there any questions? All right, so we are moving on to the special education budget. So I'll turn it over to Linda.
Linda, you're muted.
Muted.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year again. I'm Linda Holy, and I'm the Director of Pupil Personnel Services. And tonight with me, I have Cindy Martin, who's our secondary supervisor, and Dr. Michelle Joyschner, who is our elementary supervisor. So we're all, 3 of us are here to answer any questions that you may have. We put together a presentation that will provide you with an overview of special education trends, both in the state and within Berlin. We'll look at our overall expenses within our 5 schools, as well as the BTA, and also some additional funding sources that help to offset the general ed budget. And then we'll conclude our presentation with our budget requests, many of which did not make it into the superintendent's budget, but we still think it's important to share those requests with you. I think it's important for those of you that do not know that Special ed is very big within any district. So we provide special education services to students within our 5 schools. At the Berlin Transition Academy, we also have a number of students that are out of district. We provide services to students in the magnet schools. We have one student going to Bristol Tech, who we're responsible for. We have a student attending a VOAG school in Southington, who we're responsible for. We have a number of students at St. Paul's who we provide services to. And then whenever a student gets hospitalized or they're in detention, we don't provide the specific services, but we do get billed for those services. Oh. There we go. You know, before I get going to, I think it's very important. There's no way I could put this budget presentation together by myself. So the following people always help us out to gather all this information. So Laura Curtis, Ashley Dorsey, Doreen Guy, John Richards, Joanne Walicki, Sue McNally, Cindy Martin, and Michelle Zoishner. We all work together to put this presentation together. So we're going to go into the trend data. As many of you know, the special ed budget is a large portion of the district's budget, and this isn't unique to Berlin. You're going to see that the number of special needs, students with special needs, continues to increase while the overall general population decreases. And this is nationwide. It's not just statewide. It's just not within Berlin. And that being said, many students with disabilities continue to require more resources to meet their needs. So this is just one chart to show you the special ed prevalence data within the state of Connecticut over the past number of years. So you can see the special ed numbers and the percentage rate continues to increase while our overall numbers of enrollment decrease. And then I'm going to show you in a chart format as well. So here it is in a chart format for a K-12 special education prevalence rate. And then this is Berlin. You know, a few years ago, this was probably 5+ years ago, the state really took a close look at districts overall, and the magic number was 10%. You should only have about 10% of your students identified with special needs. And they would flag us, and this would be an indicator that they would look at. Well, over the past few years, that indicator has gone out the window because our rates continue to increase along with everyone in the state. Brian and I figured out our rate is close to 17% right now. So the next data I'm going to share with you is actually from the New England School Development Council. They take our data. This is something we do have to subscribe to and pay for. But the next 2 slides are just 2 pieces of data that I took from this lengthy report. So this first chart just shows you at the top the total general ed expenditures within Berlin over the past number of years. And down below shows you the special ed expenditures over the past few years. So again, our expenditures in special ed continues to increase while the expenditures for general ed decreases.
Linda.
Yeah.
Steve Jenkins, board member here, if I can interrupt. Can
Yeah.
you give some examples of the special ed services and perhaps the range of services? It's interesting to see that the numbers continue to increase and the population that's obtaining the services increases. I'm interested in kind of the typical services we provide. Maybe you can give me the basic to the more advanced. And then I'm curious if there's things that we could do, early intervention, things we could do to help minimize those costs. And I apologize for the convoluted question, but it's interesting and new to me.
No, and that's why, you're going to notice, Steve, that my presentation's a lot longer than everyone else's. I can't answer that question right now, but you're going to see further into my slide, I'm going to be able to show you that a little bit more detail. And if it doesn't, just ask me further questions. Our goal overall in education is to educate our students, our Berlin students, within their least restricted environment. We want to keep them in district. Sometimes our students' needs cannot be met within our district, and we need to work with our families and find a school program that meets their needs. So those students fall under this out-of-district expenditures. You'll hear me talk about out-of-district placements through a number of our slides. You know, it's always our goal, once a student does have to be placed in an out-of-district placement, to get them back. Sometimes that happens for some of our kids, and sometimes it doesn't. Some of our students may graduate from those placements. That law that I shared with you on Monday is really going to impact our budget here. Before our students were able to end services at 21, some of our very needy students that are outplaced, and you'll see the figures in another chart, could cost up to $250,000. That at 21 we would stop. But now, if they may go into another year, so it's going to throw a little kink into how we have to budget for our out-of-district students. So you could see, according to this chart, so we do have 29 students outplaced and 6 students in choice outplaced. And I'll give you more information throughout the presentation about how we have to pay for the choice students. So this is what PPS looks like today. We always use October 1 data when we talk about this. So if you take a look back in 2015, we only had 365 students on an individual education plan. This year, our October 1 data, we had 447 students. Currently, as of today, we have 463 students on an individual education plan. So you could see the percentages, how it has increased over the years. Our 504s have stayed pretty consistent over the past 3 years. And as of today, there's still 167. There has been no increase since October 1. Our out-of-district students has continued to increase over the years. A good point is that our magnet school students has decreased. So we see sometimes some of our students that need special ed services have been coming back to the Berlin schools. So that's a positive for us. Our VOAG and our Bristol Tech, it depends on the needs of the students. If they want to access those programs in other schools. Our service plans are what we do not do an individual education plan for a student at St. Paul's. We do a service plan for a student if they are eligible for services at St. Paul's. And what that looks at, they typically either get 1 hour of speech and language service a week or 1 hour of reading or writing or math service. That service right now is being provided by one of our retired special ed teachers, and that's funded through a grant that I will share with you later in my presentation. And then the other two, again, are hospitalizations and detentions. It all depends, which students are struggling and if they need those services. If they're in the hospital more than 10 days, then we're going to get billed for their educational services. If they're in for less than that, then we do not get billed. Our homebound tutoring services really have decreased, and some of our hospitalizations, because ESS has been put into place at the secondary level. Back in 2015, 16, 17, a lot of those homebound tutoring services were for our school avoidant kids. And right now, Effective School Solutions at the high school level has really helped to get our school avoidant kids in school. So this is what, if we had to break down our students by disability, these are our special ed students and their disabilities. So the majority of our students that we service do have a specific learning disability. Then we have speech and language. Other health impaired would fall under ADHD. Our autism numbers continue to grow. And then you can read the others. So Steve, these are the students that we service, and the amount of service that they need is really individualized to what they need in their program. But again, I'm going to show you in a few more slides our staff, and I could talk to you a little bit more about what type of services our staff give to our children.
Linda, can I just stop you for 1 second? I
Sure.
know that Carrie was trying to ask a question, but I'm not sure if it was her volume or is it not working, Carrie?
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. You don't have to go back to the other slide, but I'm just wondering if you can speak to the increase in students with IEPs. Is it largely attributable to an increase in referrals that are then resulting in qualified students, or students moving into district?
I think it's a little bit of both. Like you'll see my next slide. From July 1, we had 13 new students move in who required an IEP. And then our referrals have been pretty consistent across all 5 schools. I mean, that's a piece of data I've really never looked at about specifically how many referrals every year we have at each school, but that's something we could easily pull off of IEP Direct. But just starting this year that we weren't even anticipating, we had 13 new students move into Berlin that required special ed services. So we didn't plan for those students at all.
Sure.
So that's one of the biggest things you're going to hear about special ed, is that special ed is a moving target. Our data is ever changing, and our data today can change tomorrow, depending about who's moving into our district, who's moving out, who's being found eligible for services, and who's being dismissed from services. So that's what makes it so hard to plan for special ed right now for next year. So these are our special ed drivers. So we have the administrative salaries, our special ed salaries, our tuitions and our contracted service are our biggest drivers. And I'll get into the contracted services in another slide. So this is one of the reasons why, again, we have an increase in staff over the past few years. So right now we have 138.5 staff within the PPS department, and those are within all 5 schools plus the Berlin Transition Academy. We've always, I felt like, do a good job to develop programs for our students that have a hard time being in the general ed mainstream all the time. Unfortunately, with those programs, they always have a smaller student to teacher ratio, which drives up our increase in our staff, just because those students need that. They need that more individual attention. So some of the programs that we have our BLAST programs at Willard and at McGee that really helps to work with our students who have significant developmental disabilities, may have autism, intellectual disabilities. So some of those students need a one-to-one staff ratio. We've also had to look at then adding more speech and language pathologists, more behavioral, occupational therapists. So that's the reason for our increase in staff over the past few years. This just looks at our related services. So our related services are our school psychologists, our social workers, our speech and language pathologists, our occupational therapists, physical therapists, our assistive tech specialists, our BCBA, and our clinical social workers. And I totaled up how many we have throughout the district and where they are. You'll see that some of these positions are funded through the IDEA grant, which is a federal grant, which I will speak to at a later date. So again, it depends on the individual needs of the students. The school psychologist or social worker may see students once or twice a week individually. They may see them once or twice a week in group. The speech and language pathologist may pull a small group of students out, or they may go provide services within the classroom. Same with the occupational therapist, physical therapists. Is that answering some of your questions, Steve?
It is. Thank you. I appreciate the thoroughness.
Yep. And then here's our special ed teachers broken down and our students broken down by school, as well as our paraprofessionals. And you can see that some of these positions are also funded through the grant. What we are noticing that at Willard specifically over the past few years, our special ed numbers are decreasing at Willard, but our numbers are increasing at McGee and Berlin High as they move up. So at the end of the year, it's a constant game of, do we have to move teachers? Last year, we moved a special ed teacher from Willard and we moved them to McGee because we needed to have more special ed resources to support our kids at McGee. Two of the paraprofessionals too, and you'll see this in another slide, are paid through the choice reimbursement. And then a number of them are paid through my grant, and Cromwell is currently paying for one of the paraprofessionals. Okay, this is the biggie. This just takes a look at our students who are currently in and out of district placement. And this is probably our most unpredictable expense for students. We currently have 29 students attending schools all over the state. And these tuitions plus transportation costs range from $41,000 up to $250,000. Now, the state does help us out with some of this. So you'll see at the 2 columns to the right where it says estimated excess cost and local budget. So any tuition and transportation combination that's over $81,000, we will get reimbursed 70% of that amount. So you'll see where excess cost on school number 3, that the total is $86,406. We will get $3,706 back from the state, and our cost is $82 plus. So that's what those 2 columns mean. And again, I'll show you another example of that. When this first came out, way before I was even an administrator, I was probably practicing as a speech and language pathologist. The state used to fully fund at 100% any student over that per pupil cost. And now we've been lucky. It has been 70% for the past 5+ years that they are reimbursing. And I know Adam has done a little research with Massachusetts does this very differently. And Connecticut has talked about coming up with a different formula. Does anyone have questions on this one? Because this is the one that is one of our biggest drivers.
Adam, Selena, do we have any control over the tuition? I know we've had this discussion in the past. I mean, and is there any predictability with tuition numbers going up on an annual basis, given the various schools that our students are attending?
We use that 3% increase, and we've been pretty on target with that's typically for transportation and tuition. That's been their typical increase every year is 3%. So that's how we project what we should increase the tuition and transportation costs by, but we have absolutely no control over what they charge.
And if you have 2 schools that provide similar services, do we have any say over which school the student goes to, if there's a difference in cost?
Adam, it really comes down to any time. This is a difficult decision for the school and for the family. So what we try to do is have the families go out and look at. I know a lot about the out-of-district programs. I started my career in one of the out-of-district programs. I know the student. I know the work that's being done in these schools. And I will usually ask them to go out and look at 3 schools because they have to feel comfortable sending their child to a school, a therapeutic school every single day, getting on a van. So it's really up to the who made even the kids are part of it. Where did the kid feel a connection when they walked in, and did they get that connection with the staff?
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yep. So we do have 7 students that are placed out of district that are our choice students. We have to, you'll always see our budget is in the red because we have to pay the tuition for those choice students up front, but then we bill Hartford back for those tuitions. So Hartford will give us back everything but the $8,000 that they gave us to educate the student in Berlin. So this chart just depicts that. These are our overall just special ed department operational costs. You know, we have our general special ed budget, which looks at field trip supplies, our classroom materials. Our contracted service is the biggest. Brian talked about that this had to go up this year, that's $60,000, because one of my students who's been with us since 3 years old, and I think is in high school now as a freshman, but she has some pretty significant medical needs that now requires a nurse to be on the van with her going to school, to have a nurse by her side in the classroom and ride that van back home. So those nursing services are pretty expensive. That does, because she's outplaced, that 60,000 does get added to that tuition, that transportation. So we will get reimbursed again we're allowed to add that service in as well. But it was a big cost that we weren't expecting this year. I also have another student who requires one-to-one nursing services. She's not attending in person right now, but when she does come back next year, we were doing nursing services for her as well. And ESS at the high school is put in this. Anytime that we have to do an evaluation through a psychiatrist, anytime we have to do a neuropsych evaluation, that all comes out of here. We have a contract with CREC to provide hearing maintenance services for our students with hearing impairments. So there's a lot that again, it's that moving target. Sometimes we have our standard costs that we know, but we don't know how many psychiatric evals we're going to have to do. We don't know how many neuropsych evals we're going to have to do. So, you know, sometimes at the end of the year, we didn't use that money and we were able to give that back to Brian. And sometimes we actually go over our amounts. And then our OT, psychologist, speech and language, they have supplies that they have to purchase. We have testing forms that we need to purchase. Our transition academy budget is there. Our work study and our summer school has stayed pretty status quo. That includes transportation and salaries. So now I'm going to get into some special ed does get some extra funding, which helps offset the overall budget. So we do every year have to apply for the federal IDEA funding grant. So you'll see 611 is our big grant. And 619 is just for preschool. So our preschool grant is very minimal. It doesn't even cover the full salary of that paraprofessional, but because we have grants that keep carrying over every 3 years, we're able to keep one paraprofessional in there. The other funding goes to our paraprofessionals and our certified staff that I spoke of. We have our audit that's in there. And then this is where we have to provide those services at St. Paul's. When we used to have Moreland, it used to be more, but once Moreland closed, so when those students need that 1 hour a week of service, that comes out of this grant. And then we also offer them some in-service time just to keep them up to date on the latest trends. Like Allie Curran last year, Fane reached out and said she had a couple students that were selective mutes, which they weren't familiar with. So Allie Curran put together a presentation and she actually has to share that with them this year. Sometimes Fane will take that money and send their staff out. So they get to decide how they want to use that money. Here's the excess cost, just a little bit more specific an explanation. So our per pupil expenditure is 18,000 this year. We have to pay for 4.5 of that. So our top cost is 81,000. So anything over that, there's just a little example for you. The state will reimburse us at 70%. So you can use this chart to refer back to that big out of district tuition chart as well. We did have to, let me see. We had to start billing for Medicaid services in 2016. They no longer gave us a choice. So we bill for services such as occupational therapy services, speech and language, physical therapy, counseling, as well as evaluations. We're in the process of exploring to see if we could build services for our BCBAs and our RBTs. We use this money right now to fund one of our OT's salary. Our revenue this year has gone down because of the pandemic. They're very strict. If a student, so say one of our students is remote, the social worker, goes in through Zoom, wants to do the counseling session. If that student does not turn on their camera, we can't bill for it. They say this, you have to be able to see the student face to face. Some kids, just because of the pandemic, aren't available. So that's why we're down about $10,000 this year for billable services. And then this is additional choice reimbursement that we get. So again, I explained to our students that are outplaced, so anything over the $8,000 for that tuition, they have to reimburse us. We also have 4 students that have pretty intensive special ed services. So student 1, we look at their special ed teacher, and then para support and a school psychologist. We total up those services according to how much, so the special ed teacher, how many students are they seeing on their caseload, come up with a formula. So this is a bill that we will send to Hartford and get reimbursed for those additional services from Choice. So we'll get an extra $111,000 this year. They won't give that to us till the spring, but so anything that cost over the $8,000. That's also for students that are within our district. We can apply that to excess costs, but we don't have any students right now that are over that $81,000. So here's our requests to support the students' academic and social emotional needs. You're going to notice that, like I said, a lot of them have been taken out. So we did request 1 full-time special education teacher for the BTA. Cromwell did, I do have some good news for all of you. Cromwell did, the PBS director did present her proposal to their Board of Ed last night about bringing us together as one program. It was, they love the idea. So I think it's a go, which is one of the reasons that this was removed from the budget, because we have to sit down with our business manager and Cromwell's business manager, the superintendents, and the 2 directors to say, how are we going to make this work for our students and for them? How are we going to share those expenses? Will it be completely split down the middle? We don't know yet. That's something we have to talk about. But like I said, we do need a second special ed teacher. I think last night I shared we only had 11 students. Right now we have 12 students attending our BTA, and next year we'll have 25. So we definitely need 2 special ed teachers to support those students next year. We're going to need more paraprofessionals. We don't have a good handle on that specifically yet, because we have to see which kids are coming up. And like I shared last night, currently, the way that we've been working with Cromwell over the past 3 years is that we've been charging them the per pupil expenditure a little higher. We charged $20,000 this year per student. They had 3 students. But one of their students this year did need a 1-to-1 paraprofessional. So they hired that person, and that person works with their student in the transition. We also, for the past 2 years, have asked for a van for the BTA. And this is basically just so we can have more flexibility with our program. But I really believe we could save costs if we purchase our own vans. And the director in Cromwell is currently researching grants to do this, even if we can't fund it through our budget. Many transition programs have their own vans to transport their kids. This is not to pick the kids up from school and bring them home. This is when they go off to their job sites, or they need a van on Mondays to go to Stop and Shop to get their groceries for the week, because they make their lunches every day when they go on the job. This is when they go out into the community. We're constantly working with NBT. Vans are constantly showing up at BTA. John Richards totaled it up. It's a number that we never really looked at before. The transportation kind of was just sunk into our overall transportation costs. But he said this year it would cost us about $48,000 just to run our vans for the program. So I think if we can get 1 or 2 vans, that would be another savings for the program. And our staff are very eager to get, it's not a specific license, it's some paperwork they have to do so that they could drive the students in the vans. When I was at Wheeler Clinic, I was able to do that as well. So I think down the road that would be a cost savings for us overall.
Hey, Linda?
Yeah.
This is Steve Jenkins here again. I see you talk about the purchase of a van. Have you looked into the cost of leasing?
No. Jeff, have you looked at all into leasing? I know Jeff did some research.
Yeah, I haven't looked at actually leasing a van for a period of time for the year or whatever. I know what we've been doing right now, what Linda talked about is having NBT either using our vans if possible or renting us their vans on a periodic basis, basically an hourly basis, which they always do when we need more vans than we have available. So we have a few different routes we can go. I know last year we talked about, Linda, seeing if we could get you a van back there, but it didn't get through the capital plan.
Right.
Very frankly, it was put in the capital plan against this year with the town and did not get approved. But with those kind of numbers, $48,000, it seems to me we should be able to do it more cheaply.
And for the new board members too, and this is unique to many, I don't think many towns do this, but the vans that NBT uses, they are our vans.
Sure.
So we purchase the vans through our budget, and then NBT maintains them and hires the drivers to drive those vans. And I know Jeff has looked at the cost advantages and disadvantages of owning our vans versus the transportation company owning the vans.
And Linda, can you also talk about approximately how old these vans are? We've had them for a number of years. So I think if we were to do a cost benefit analysis of constantly having a monthly payment versus just paying the insurance policy after they're paid off, I think leasing would result in a significant increase, because some of our vans are like 17 or 19 years old. Is that correct? I remember last year was our big topic.
We've improved the fleet over the years, but we did have vans that were 16 years old, 17 years old. So we are getting quite a long life out of the vans, over 100,000 miles. But to Steve's point there are things that we do lease in a similar fashion. All of our copiers and printers, large format, are now leased because it was cost effective to do that. So I think the big thing is we recognize that transportation is a large cost. I think that's why Linda's suggesting that we look at the possibility of, in certain areas owning the van and even having paraprofessionals drive these vans versus paying the fee for, the trips. So, we're constantly looking at it.
This is something completely new. I meant to put it in last year, and it was a little bit after the budget presentation, but we were looking for a 20-hour-a-week transition coordinator. We used to have one of these. This person was dedicated to the students in our STEP program at the high school, which are self-contained program for our students with social emotional needs. That position was cut many years ago. But as I spoke of Monday night about transition services, our students, all of our students on an IEP need to work on transition services. We don't have a good program at the high school level to actually get those students out in the community. Some of our students have the opportunity to work in our school cafeteria. Sometimes we send some of our students over to the preschool program at Willard. Now we can keep them at the high school to work in the preschool program. Our autism program and our life skills program put together a coffee shop, which staff can come out in the morning or the afternoon and purchase coffee. So that's another employment where we could teach them soft skills, how to work in an employment area. So this position would really help to facilitate getting some of our students within the high school out and get them experience in what it is to work in a job, to work on a job site. Brian spoke of this in his budget Monday night. Every year we have to request more paraprofessionals. Again, it goes to the specific needs of our students, many of our specialized programs. Some of our kids require one-to-one student to teacher ratio. And, you know, Cindy and Michelle really took a close look at this when we started to put the budget together and looking as kids transition from preschool to BLAST, at the elementary to BLAST at McGee, any of our students with social emotional. And this is what we came up at, that we would need 3 paraprofessionals at the Transition Academy, 1 student at our BLAST program at the elementary, because we have a preschooler transitioning into that program, and that para needs to stay in our preschool because our preschool numbers continue to grow. And then we have a BLAST student from the elementary going up to McGee. McGee right now, again, as I spoke of, we eliminated our bridge program, which was our social emotional program there. So we just need more para support to help those students stay within the mainstream. Pathways is our autism program at the high school, and then our life skills program at the high school. So right now, 3 paraprofessionals have been kept in the budget.
Can I just ask a question about that? I know I asked previously, I think probably at our F&O committee meeting. I don't believe it was this past Monday I asked it, but so if we are partnering with Cromwell,
yep,
and they're either paying tuition or we're working out a deal, why are we putting 3 paras into our budget if there's potentially going to be a revenue stream, or there won't be a revenue stream, but they'll also be doing something? Shouldn't they be sending their own paras or paying for their paras? Or if we do have revenue coming in, wouldn't it balance out? Does it have to be in the budget? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Are you just talking about the 3 paras for BTA or overall?
Yeah, sorry, the 3 paras for BTA. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
Yeah, I mean, when I did this budget, Julia, we didn't know where we were with Cromwell. So now that I know that, I think that, again, that's something we have to sit down and say, okay, let's look at all of our students, because it's still, we're not sure all 25 are coming. Cromwell's not sure if all 7 are coming. And where do we need the paraprofessional support? And are we going to split those costs evenly? So I think I'll have more information for you after we have that sit down with the supers and the business managers.
And do you think that's going to happen prior to this budget or after?
Well, I was hoping to get through this week. And I don't know when Cromwell is presenting their budget to their board. And after they get through that, then no, I think we need to start moving on this sooner rather than later.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. We also put in the budget, this was removed, a full-time registered behavior technician. We currently have 7 RBTs working throughout the district, and they're responsible for collecting and analyzing data for our BCBAs, our school psychologists, social workers. These are students that have behaviors, significant behaviors that we have to keep data on and find out, okay, why is this happening? You know, how can we help shape that behavior? They're also, what's been very helpful at McGee this past year is they're also responsible for providing coaching to the staff working with our students who are struggling behaviorally. And like I shared, we eliminated our behavior program at McGee. So these RBTs have been instrumental in providing support to our staff and students. We put this in the budget last year. I don't think this is something that we were looking to do this upcoming year, but I didn't want to lose sight of it. I thought it was still important to keep it in the budget because this is, if we were to do this, this is going to take on a lot of work, and just because of the pandemic and everything. But I still think it's important that if we want to increase our preschool program, like I said here, one of Brian's long-term goals is to offer full day preschool for our kids in Berlin. So the first step to do this would be to add full day to our preschool for our integrated special ed program. Right now we have, and Michelle, actually, I'm going to turn this over to Michelle. I've been talking a lot. Why don't you kind of share with the setup of our preschool program and the half days versus the full days?
Sure. We have 2 classrooms that are half-day programs. So there's a 2.5-hour session each morning and a 2.5-hour session each afternoon. Our special education students in those rooms attend 4 days a week, and 3 days a week there are peer models that come in during those times. Our other 2 classrooms are our extended day programs, which are up to 22.5 hours a week. Now we have some students, our younger ones, some of those that have just turned 3 and came to us from birth to 3 may only be in that room in the mornings until they don't need naps anymore and can stay in, can handle the longer day. Then we work on increasing their hours from there. But 2 of those classrooms are 22.5 hours a week. And they do, so their days are 4 days a week. It is 9 to 2 and then a half day on Wednesdays.
And this kind of just shows what our current numbers are now, and what our projected numbers are for next year. Again, this is a moving target. Sometimes people don't put their kids in birth to 3 services and then they make a referral, but this is what we know. Michelle's constant. This is one program where students are constantly coming into our program. They don't just start in the fall and go with us to June. They have to be in our program as soon as they turn 3 years old. So we have kids constantly coming into our program all throughout the year.
And it's hard to measure and predict how many are coming in until the parents, when the kids are in birth to 3, have to release information to the district. Until they do that, we don't know that they're out there. So in most cases, we know a good 6 months in advance, but we've had a few surprises this past year where we only knew a couple months before the kids turned 3 that their parents signed releases to us.
So now I'm going to end with our effective school solutions. So this is the second year that we requested to put just one clinician at McGee. That one clinician through effective school solutions would be $100,000. We currently have ESS or effective school solutions at BHS, and we contract with 2 clinicians. They're with us all day. So we requested one more at McGee. And the reason why we're doing that is, again, the social emotional issues that are coming up continues to increase, not only with special education students, but students in the general ed setting. I was in a meeting today with Karen Dupre and the school counselors and social workers, psychologists from McGee, and they're dealing with a handful of students that are really struggling social emotionally. One student is currently being hospitalized. We're trying to get intensive in-home services through DCF into the homes to help. So that's anxiety and depression continues to increase, especially at the secondary level. And I think at the middle school level, those kids are just trying to come into their own, trying to find out who they are. We have a growing number of students that are transitioning to different genders at the middle school level. So they're dealing with all of that as well as all the other issues that are going on in their lives. Right now, as of tonight, we made 46 DCF referrals. We made 16 reports of concern and 23 at-risk reports. Those at-risk reports are anytime a student says that they want to hurt themselves. We have to do a risk assessment for them. And then psychiatric evaluations. So
Hey,
just,
Linda?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Steve Jenkins here again. Can you just comment, and maybe some of the other folks can comment in, for example, that position that's not funded, the impact to the other educational providers, whether it's the school principals, the teachers, the other folks, what's the impact on that? I found that when it's not addressed, it bleeds over and it distracts from other resources. So if you can help put it in perspective, when you look at that cost benefit, we're not spending the 100,000, but what are we losing from the distraction from other professionals putting their time and effort into the right place?
I'm going to share with you a slide about what ESS staff did last year with urgent, we call them urgent sessions. But we actually talked, and I'm going to ask Sal and Tim and Karen to speak up as well. But today in our meeting, when I met with those mental health providers, one of the school counselors said, now she's working with the 8th graders, but when these students were in 6th grade, she had 3 pretty intensive kids that she didn't get to know the 150 kids on her caseload because those 3 students took a lot of her time. And the difference, what the ESS staff can do, and when Kelly Mayo was here, I really haven't gotten to talk with Katie and Barb about this, but when she was the assistant principal, she said they don't come to her anymore. Like the staff are able to spend the time with those kids, with those families. They're going out to their home. So it is taking a lot off of the plates of the administrators. Before ESS at the high school, and this is what's happened at the middle school now, you know, our clinicians have caseloads of 25, 30. One of these students could really just take your entire day. And that means that those other students that are supposed to be serviced that day are not. The ESS clinicians have 9 to 10 students each on their caseload. There's a reason for that, because those 9 to 10 students on their caseload are our students that are in constant crisis and need that one-to-one support. Their parents, family members need that one-to-one support. That's the only way to manage helping these students through these trying times that they're having. So that's how, and Sal and Tim, I don't know if you want to speak to what's been going on at McGee with some of our kids.
Yeah, I'm actually, thank you, Linda. I'm actually going to turn it over to Karen a little bit, because Karen Desprez served as a counselor for many years, and now she's our lead teacher. But I just want to share, maybe professionally and personally, when you have a student or a child in your home that is emotionally dysregulated or is identified with a disability, you know, within the school, you know, purposes, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. It's you know, our school days end for our counselors, for our clinical folks, and I think one of the things that we find often, it's support for the family. So the relationships that teachers can build with students is one thing. If you can work with those families, because sometimes those families don't know how to deal with a student that is so dysregulated that, you know, they may have suicide ideologies. They may, a lot of times they don't even want to come to school. I know our counselors have left the building to pull students out of bed every day. And you can only do that so many times because there's also students back at school. And I find that ESS extends the school day to work very closely with the family. But I'm going to ask Karen to speak a little bit more about that, because I know she has a whole lot of experience professionally as well.
Sure. Thanks, Al. I think it's tough because I think the families need so much support. Oftentimes it's a family situation that is just breaking down, which leads the child to really develop poor coping skills or no coping skills when it comes to stressful situations. They become avoidant. They don't know how to ask for help, and it's taxing, because I feel like just this year with kids being remote, I've made multiple home visits with our counselors, and it takes a lot of time to set those up, to go to the homes, to knock on doors, to wait for parents to come, to go back to the car and call them and say, we're sitting in the driveway. It's, you know, and it's all in an effort to really support the child and the family and let them know that we're here and we want to help and we want them to be successful and we want them to be educated. And especially at the middle school, I feel very passionate about supporting our counselors in doing this, because I think that this is a really tough time for our middle school kids. And I want to set them up for success and develop those coping skills and good habits so that they have that leading into high school so that they graduate. And that's really our main goal. But I can tell you that it's all hands on deck and it's hours of work documenting and letters and contacting outside agencies and working with the school nurse and working with special ed teachers or regular ed teachers, meeting with parents. It really is a pretty time consuming effort and it's worth it. But I think if we did have something like this that could support our efforts and really get in there to support what we're trying to do would be even more effective in building off of what we've done and continuing to do that to help these kids.
Well, Karen, and what we spoke of today, it's hard for you guys to maintain that, to be able to go out into the home. Like the kids know eventually you're not going to keep knocking on their doors. Whereas at ESS, we say, nope, get out there every day, because again, they have that smaller caseload so they could spend that time.
Right. We have to set up an appointment. So sometimes it takes a couple of days for us to get out there versus ESS. They could go immediately. The kid's not at school and they leave and they go and they get them, or they support the family in getting them out of bed. Whereas we really don't have the capacity to do that.
So as I said, right now, we currently contract with ESS to have 2 full-time licensed mental health professionals to work with 20 students and families. They're highly trained. They know the outside resources, they have good connections. And then each full-time staff member is available one evening each week for family sessions. So they do offer family sessions, individual family sessions, and then they also, which is powerful for our families, they offer a group. So all the family members, parents can get together and share their stories and know that they're not alone. So they do that as well. These are just some of the services that are provided for the students. They do daily group therapy. They allow lunch period. A lot of these students don't want to go into the cafeteria, so there's a section of their office area set up for lunch. They do individual therapy, crisis intervention, school avoidant home visits, risk assessments, like we said, outside referrals to ICAPS, which is an intensive in-home child and adolescent service. The IOP is an intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization, and just other therapy systems that are set up. And then what they do for the families, they do family therapy and consultation supports, and they also provide a monthly parent newsletter. These are some of the high-risk behaviors that we're dealing with, not only at the high school, at the middle school as well, as we talked about the suicide, the verbal aggression, substance abuse, family conflicts, sexual trauma, school avoidance, loss of credit, hospitalization, self-harm, eating disorders, dealing with loss. So those are just some of the high-risk behaviors. I'm not going to read all of these. Again, this is for you, but these are just some examples of what happened last year with some of our students and the response of the ESS team and the outcome, which was very positive overall. This is just an overall, the ESS provides us with data. They're constantly keeping data on their services for us. So again, they've been with us since 2015-16, thanks to the board and the families coming out to say that this service is important. For last school year, there was a significant improvement in grades, discipline, and absences. And right now, during the COVID related, they're saying 94% of students are engaging, whether that's hybrid or in person. And they like working with us. That's the last bullet. Steve, this is what I was talking about for those urgent sessions. So they keep data on this. So the total number of urgent sessions last year during marking periods 1, 2, and 3, they had 57 urgent sessions with students, and they said that it was an estimated staff hours of 28 to work through all those issues. So again, this takes time off of the administrators, any other mental health providers if we didn't have this program. And this is just a little data. This is for marking period 1 of this year, about the sessions that they've had with students, whether it's remote or in person. And lastly, this is just what the parents have said over the past few years about the program. They're very grateful for the program. They've really, I mean, we had one student come up when we were hosting another school, and the student said the program saved his life. So I always end with that. How do you justify, put a dollar amount on that when a student says that the program saved his life? So that was a lot of information. Thank you for the questions. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us, any of us, via email, pick up the phone. And thank you again, always, for your support.
Linda, Jamie Miller, board member. I have a question for you about the bridge program.
Yep.
Well, I guess my simple question, why did we get rid of it? What was the reasoning behind that at the middle school?
I think it's a multi-answers for you, Jamie. We tried a number of years. It takes a very special person, first of all, to find a teacher to do that program. And we struggled to find that right match. Special ed teachers are a shortage area right now. And then just coming from an out-of-district therapeutic placement, when students are outplaced, and we even have students in our STEP program, when the students are outplaced, there's a lot of incentives for them to put in place in order to participate in that program. In order to do this in our middle school, let me tell you how it works at the high school first, and then I'll tell you the obstacles at the middle school. Our STEP program is a self-contained program for our students that some of our bridge students transitioned into. Self-contained means that, if they want to take a class out, they have to earn to take that class out. Many of the kids don't want to. They just feel comfortable in that environment. So they're going out to PE with everyone in that STEP program because Eileen has it built into her schedule that we have a PE teacher, or Barb, with her master scheduling, that they are receiving PE just with the kids in the STEP program. They're receiving science from a certified science teacher just with the kids in the STEP program. They're going to a special in the mainstream, or Barb, do you have them with a group special this year? We've done that in the past. I don't know if we have it this year.
No, not this year. They're with themselves in digital photography and personal finance.
So they're by themselves. They're not with the gen ed mainstream.
Not this year.
And also at the high school, you can have a 10th grader taking a class in 9th grade. You can have a 10th grader, 11th grader taking a class in 10th grade. The way the middle school schedule is set up, 6th graders could only be in classes with 6th graders. 7th graders could only be in classes with 7th graders. Our kids, we just couldn't set up a program. They can't just have PE together because Sal does not have the staffing needs or the space to be able to do that. We can't just have exploratories with those kids. So there was no incentive for them to say, okay, you know what, you're going to do your English and writing here, but I get to go out and eat lunch with everyone in the cafeteria. Oh, I still get to go to exploratories. We didn't have the coverage. So it was too hard to do. Because of the schedule. Now, if we could have the program outside of McGee, it would be a big incentive to say, I want to get back into the middle school, but we just couldn't make it work effectively. Jamie, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
No, it does. I think, obviously, me, I'm full support of those kind of programs, but it makes sense as to why it wasn't working. How many kids were in the program before it was kind of,
The majority of our kids are doing real well. I know Cindy's looking for her numbers right now. Some of the kids transitioned up, and they're either in the STEP program or in our AAP program.
Okay.
We had 3 kids, I think, transition up from the elementary. One student is not making it, and that's student that we had to outplace. The other students are holding their own. And then Cindy, the other kids that were in the bridge program.
Right. So last year, I believe there were 6 students in the bridge program, and we have 6 students now that we're calling our behavior programs at McGee. I think one of the benefits we found this year is that they feel more included with their other classmates. and that we don't have them all together. Sometimes behaviors feed off of other behaviors. So we've seen a benefit of them being in just regular special education classes or gen ed classes with that kind of support. And having the RBT at McGee has been really helpful in helping them with all their individual behavior plans, taking some data and some increased para support.
Gotcha.
They're actually doing better than they were last year.
Cindy, do you think that, next year, because hopefully we'll be coming out of the pandemic, and as we know at the middle school especially, well, not just there, but we have, a high number of kids with the social emotional, and this obviously not just for general population, but, for those specific kids that it's really affecting. Do you guys think that moving into the 2021-22 school year, that is going to be a challenge by not necessarily not having that program, but coming up with different programming needs for those kids? Do you just think it's going to be an increase because of what's going on?
It's hard to tell until we really get the kids back in. Yeah. We have a lot of kids that are remote that we're not really sure or are struggling with remote that we don't always have our eyes on as well. Yeah. So I think it's kind of on a case-to-case basis. The students that we have this year, we really feel like we are meeting their needs.
Okay.
And I think kind of individualizing each student's program has been helpful to them. Again, the support of our BCBA and our RBT have been invaluable. It does take a little bit more time because we have so many individual little programs and different case managers to look at that. But overall, we found the students are doing better. And I think Sal and Tim could attest to that also.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, if I could just chime in, this is Tim Cheverini, assistant principal at McGee. I think it's been a real benefit to have the flexibility at the middle school to mix and match staff, to provide the students with role models, to diversify their schedules to meet their individual needs this year. And I feel like we're really onto something with these kids. I think it's opened up worlds for them, and I think they are doing much better. We feel like we've accomplished a lot with meeting their needs this year under this new model.
Gotcha. Thanks, Tim.
I mean, Jamie, we've had those conversations. I think the smaller teacher to student ratio is definitely giving them the confidence that they could do this in the mainstream. We just have to continue to build that confidence for the students. And this is where the paraprofessional support has come into play. Some of those kids just need that one person say, you know what, let's take a break out in the hallway. And they can't stay out in that hallway by themselves because they may get themselves into trouble. So we need that staff member to say, okay, what's going on? What's bothering you? How can they coach them through those coping strategies so they could get back in? When we had the bridge program, they would have gave up and said, no, I just want to go back. Like they almost acted out more in science if they were born in science and they wanted to get back into the bridge because the expectations would have been a little lower. So I actually think this model, as long as we have the staff support to support them, it has been more draining on Cindy and administrators because there's a lot more special ed teachers they have to touch base with. But even the special ed teachers have said this model is working so much better.
All right, good. I think that answers me, because what I think I was really looking at for a budgetary point of view is that moving into the next school year, would it drain your resources by having to focus on these individual kids? But that answers it much better for me. So thank you very much.
Any other questions? Again, as always, thank you guys for your support. I know special ed is a big part of the budget, but we're doing a great job. So thank you. We couldn't do what we're doing without the support of everybody.
All right, well, thank you so much for that budget. You know what, I love that you finished with ESS. I was actually just talking, as a board in the past, we've really supported ESS and love ESS so much. And we've just seen and heard from the families and throughout the community what a great impact it has. And I'm so happy you finished with it. I was just talking to ESS at my school today, and I was like, you guys are miracle workers in what they do with our students, all the students. It's incredible. And very much needed. So I'm glad you ended on that very happy note with ESS. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And moving on to the district-wide non-instructional programs / athletics.
Hello, everybody. Dave Francolangia, Athletic Director here at the school, Berlin High School and the middle school. Thank you for allowing me a little bit of time to present my budget for the 21-22 upcoming school year. Before we begin, I don't have a ton of slides, but I did want to mention to everybody that the process in terms of how this happens. And really it starts with a sound conversation with each of the head coaches, really starting having conversations about transportation, about equipment, about what their necessities are. And I basically give them some paperwork to fill out, had conversations, and they prioritize 1 through 3. Things that they absolutely need for the upcoming season, things that would be great to have and help aid our student athletes during that particular season. In that category, there might be equipment and needs that would last a few years, several years. And then the third thing would be really extra things, things that are not necessarily needed, but could totally enhance and help our student athletes, coaches to excel based upon where we are and where we want to be. So, when having these conversations, as you can see over here, I'm taking a look at obviously our core values for the district and embedded a lot of that into our athletic goals and values. And I'm not going to read everything necessarily here, but to highlight some of the things that we've talked about throughout the course of my short tenure here since July, talking about sportsmanship, integrity, respect for others, obviously communication, and not only with the student athletes, but with the parents and communities, to make sure that we're going to be going out there and competing at a very high level. One of the things included in the budget this particular year is once the conversations occurred with all of the head coaches from the fall, winter, and spring, one of the things that came up was our cheer coaches. The two girls that are our cheer coaches now, Nicole and Megan, have done a tremendous job. We have over 20 cheerleaders right now. And, looking at the budget, we saw that they were splitting a stipend for both the head coach and the assistant coach, but also splitting that stipend for the fall and winter. The amount of hours they put in, they don't just do sideline cheer, they do a lot of competitions. Just a little side note, we're going to be getting some more information tomorrow about our current winter state of athletics. And hopefully I'll be able to report back to you guys on Friday what is going to be transpiring for the winter season. Just a little side note. But in terms of the fall and winter, they were getting a stipend that was split. And this was no fault of their own, obviously, but they've incorporated competition, have done a tremendous job, and felt that it was needed, looking at the hours that they were going to put in for the fall and put in the hours that they were going to put in for the winter, not just sideline cheer for some of the fall sporting events, and not just all of the competition that they're going to be doing in the wintertime, but also the sideline cheer for basketball games. Felt that it's needed that they get paid a stipend for both the fall and winter season. Again, the rationale is taking a look at the hours, practices, and how much time they've been putting into the overall cheer program. For McGee, there's no new staff or stipend additions that we're going to be moving forward with. In this budget, in terms of equipment and facility, taking a look at the numbers, one number that jumps out, pretty much the only number that jumps out for all the sports programs, is for BHS football and boys cross country uniforms. The work that Jeff and Ashley had done in the summertime when I came in, and taking a look at some of the numbers and budgeted items that we had without the spring, they did a very nice job resurrecting our uniform base. The two things that we're going to be looking forward towards next year is purchasing our football uniforms. We have not purchased football uniforms in 10 plus years from the high school standpoint. The last set of uniforms were donated by a very generous individual, and they're due. So we're taking a look at that as a big ticket item for next year. McGee uniforms, they're in good standing. We're in cycle with those. In terms of other aspects of equipment, facility, managing games, and so forth, transportation, there's a very slight increase per our contract with New Britain Transportation. Officials budget, we're going to keep the same. There's been conversations already at the CIAC level of not increasing the official fees, considering COVID and other aspects of schools' budgets. And they've done that in the last 6-7 years I've been athletic director. They've done it actually a couple of times. So it's not out of the norm based upon what's going on in current situations. Transportation is going to slightly increase. However, y'all have heard some pretty good information regarding the fields. It looks like there's going to be a new turf field in the back. And my hope is that transportation, after that project is complete, and hopefully things work out very well, that we'll be able to lower the cost of transportation after next year. Building operations, instruction. For the most part, when going through this, I'm an individual that if we're going to be going out getting uniforms, we're going to take a look at 3 or 4 different quotes and trying to make sense of what's best for not only the team at hand, but also taking a look at being fiscally responsible. I've done this with major quotes that we obtain, and you'll be surprised at some of the items that are out there, whether they're Under Armour, Nike, or a Russell uniform. The prices vary based upon the different types of material that's out there, and even just who's a reputable dealer for either Nike or Under Armour or Russell or whatever type of uniform might be. But when looking at the overall operation of our budget, I really did not change much at all. If you take a look at the overall numbers, I think the overall numbers are down a little bit from our previous year. And, that's, I'm trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible, considering what has occurred. We did have a fall season, except for football, but some of the costs associated with football, we're probably going to see a little bit of a return on that. We're getting more information about winter season. It looks like there's a lot of promising news. We're not going to know until tomorrow, but some of those operational costs are going to be down a little bit. So moving forward, it's tough to judge where we're going to be. I did not feel comfortable increasing our overall athletic budget, considering the state that we are in this past year and what we're going to be moving for the rest of this school year. If increases occur and costs occur, we're going to have to we're going to have to be smart, and we're going to have to be creative in what I do with our budget moving forward, in terms of even scheduling scrimmages, and maybe we don't scrimmage 4 scrimmages, maybe we scrimmage 3 scrimmages if money's an issue moving forward next year. But I think with the budget that we have and the budget that we have this year moving forward, we're going to be sound. We're going to be at a great place. We're going to be able to provide for our student athletes. And I think even next year, as things do increase, we're going to be in a pretty good standing and pretty good shape overall. So, it's a very different year coming in, obviously, because of COVID. So having a true understanding of what actually is transpiring with budgets when there hasn't been invitational meets for cross country or indoor track, the tournaments, fees and this expenditures that are dealt with, that it's tough to comprehend kind of everything that's gone on at this particular standpoint with athletics. So that's the rationale for keeping everything flat, if you will. So I'd love to answer any questions at all. I just thank you guys. I know it's a lot of time and effort on your part. Thank you for your dedication to obviously the board and the conversations that we have with administration, but for all the student athletes and all the students at the Berlin Public School systems.
Franco, Adam Selena, just want to thank you for everything you've done in uncertain times. Obviously, athletics are a big part of our community, and I think that in the short period of time, you brought a new perspective, a new face to Berlin athletics, and I think that everyone's very happy to see you here, students, parents, and supporters. So appreciate everything you've done, and looking forward to hopefully a portion of a winter season, and hopefully moving on to a spring season.
Thank you, Adam.
Frank, Mark Prusen, board member. Just a quick question for you. I know in the past before COVID, and I know it'd be tough to do now with COVID here, but has any of your sports teams ever done fundraisers like for uniforms and things like that that could go ahead and save some money for you in your overall budget?
Yeah, so uniforms, being a high school, public high school, my philosophy in terms of uniforms is that the town should be paying for it. There are other things, for example, that the town doesn't pay for. For example, I'll give you a couple of examples. Boys and girls soccer, right? They in October, November, they're playing outdoors. The school does not purchase them warm-ups, okay? They'll do fundraising to purchase those on their own. So those are kind of the things that I was talking about earlier, about not necessarily the necessities, but things that would be aided. And they do a lot of work with fundraising. They do a lot of work with our boosters athletics program. And it's a win-win situation because the way our boosters is structured, a certain percentage of their fundraising stays within the boosters to provide sports awards and the sweatshirts the kids have, among other things. But there's scenarios like that, up and down where they're doing some fundraising for some of the gear that they wear, the t-shirts, shorts, and so forth, but they're also doing stuff to provide backpacks and, some of the things on a list that, our budget's not going to cover, a priority level of 3, things that would just enhance the program, but are not necessities. Those are the things that Boosters really does a great job for each of the programs.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave, this is Jeff. I got a chance to go down and see the completed softball field down at Sage. Tremendous, just tremendous addition to everything down there. If anybody on the board hasn't been down there to get a chance to stroll through Sage when the snow's not on the ground, what a great facility for the softball players.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I can say, I'm kind of late to that project and the new turf at Scalise, but just had an initial meeting with our town, Jen Ochoa and Steve Wood today, taking a look at first initial steps for potentially the turf field in the back and some of the other improvements from the grant from the state. I'm just really excited. I mean, to be a Berlin resident in general, you got to be thrilled and excited about. But if you happen to play some sports in our town, regardless at the youth level, middle school, high school, you got to be really excited to be a part of this town. If something does come up moving forward and you'd like to shoot me an email or give me a phone call and you have some other questions, I'd definitely be happy to, have a conversation with you. Again, thanks for all your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. We're moving on now to site and building.
Jeff, you're muted. Jeff, you're still muted.
I know.
There you go. There you go.
The touchscreen wasn't working over here. Okay, let me go back one more. Good evening, everybody. Jeff Cugno, Director of Operations. My role this evening is to address the process we use to prepare a budget for capital and site and building improvements. As you all know, a pretty big thing for the district. Our facilities, we've got a number of them, and certainly we've got to keep them up to snuff, and we have to partner with the town in order to make sure that happens correctly. In order to explain how we get to the projects and the dollar amounts correctly, currently, noted in the superintendent's budget, I have to address a couple of funding sources provided and controlled by the town, as well as how they affect the funding for both facility improvements and operating equipment. As I said, most of these things are very expensive, and we have to share the resources with a number of different competing issues. Therefore, it's important for me to note that the end result, namely the funds requested in our equipment and other expenditure categories on your budget, the 11 categories on your budget, of the proposed budget, are directly related to the town's capital plan proposal and to the town's facility department proposal. Okay, capital plan. I'm sure most of you know that that's the part that the town gets involved with, along with the Board of Education, to figure out what the large projects, how the large projects that they're anticipating doing in this coming year and the next few years, how they get funded. A couple of rules that we go by now that have changed a little bit in the last couple of years. 2 years ago, we used to just give our site and building and capital plan objectives and also our requests to the town, and they would fund them either in capital plan or not, or fund them in their facility budget or not. They wouldn't be in our operating budget. A couple of years ago, that changed. We now present a number of projects to the Capital Management Committee, which does the recommendations to the town for the capital plan. We can only give projects that are over $25,000 to them. Let me see if I can move this screen over here a little bit. Yeah. So we provide a number of things, and I can show you the list of those things. The anticipated purchases less than $25,000 have to be budgeted in our operating budget. Now, you can hear all the things that the building principals were requesting. There are a number of things that are requested every year and are necessary. All of those things now, most of them, because they are $25,000 or under, have to go in our operating budget. You notice we don't have a plan in our operating budget, or at least a category in our operating budget for capital projects, or literally for site and building. What we have is equipment and other expenditures. And it's important that you note that, because it'll come into play at the end of my presentation. One last thing, technology purchases are not eligible for the town capital plan. It's just the rules that they've put in place over the last couple of years. So all the technology expenditures that we have to go forward with, and of course you do know the kind of expenditures we had over the last years, of course, with COVID, they're not eligible for the capital plan. So again, if we don't have grants to do things like that, they have to come out of our operating budget. There is, by the way, a copy of the total request from the Capital Management Committee for the town and the Board of Ed is available on Schoology to review. It's rather sizable. I do want to show you one thing just to give you a little idea, because it does help you understand why we are where we are on what the current, if it will come up here. There you go. This is the currently proposed capital plan for next year. It includes, obviously, not only some school things, which I'll go over, but also every other department in the town. This is nowhere near what was requested overall, as you can imagine, but you can get down to the totals here, and there's a total of a little over $2 million. $477,000 of that are noted for schools, and they're highlighted. These three things Now, these are proposals. They haven't been approved by the Board of Finance, naturally, or the council yet, but this is what the capital committee is approving out of everything we asked for. Fire alarms at Willard, a couple of new vans. We do own our own vans, as you heard earlier today, and we try to refurbish them until we can, and then buy new ones to replace them. And then just general ADA upgrades for the district. Those are going to be put in the town's general fund under the facility department to take care of on behalf of the schools. We're pleased at that. Down here, some other school things that the capital management plan, capital management committee liked. They're supporting these things, but they're saying if in fact we want to consider doing them out of surplus on the town's budget if there is a surplus. So that's what we're looking at, or possibilities for the capital plan this year. That's not our operating budget, but it obviously plays into what we can do in our operating budget. You can see that the Library Media Center, Hubbard Elementary School, and some floor tiles that they talked about maybe being funded out of the capital plan or out of surplus from the town rather than out of our budget. So it's a partnership that we go forward with. We apply for everything to the capital management committee and hopefully come out with everything we can. You can see generally this is that for your information purposes. Let me go back to my plan over here. I think it's this one. Maybe not. This one. How about this one? There we go. Okay. So moving on. Initial building request for the town capital plan, just to give you a sense of what we requested versus what we got. And this is not really much different over the years, but I think it's important for you to know that the district does evaluate what they need and request, knowing that only in certain times can we get the kind of funding we really want, but it's important for the board to know the kind of requests. Building and districts requested $2 million. These recommendations from the Fire Associates, for those that were on the board before, know that we had a facility plan done by Fire Associates, and these are capital requests that they thought were appropriate. They're not being funded at this point, except for some of the Fire issues that have to do with HVAC they're looking at. But as you can see, it's just general information for you to know the magnitude of improvements that we would like that are considered capital improvements in town regulations. Now, normally when we don't get anything funded or don't get it all funded naturally in the capital plan, we go back to the general fund. Hold on a second. The projects proposed in the town capital plan right now, as I discussed, were the one, this is a summary of the ones that I showed you on that big item on the other attachment. So we did pretty well, very frankly. We did pretty well with $477,000. Again, some out of surplus, some out of what they're anticipating in their actual general fund. And I've got a couple of notes here that I want to suggest. Second. I will note one thing. Oh, I have to go back on one of the items here. I didn't have my notes in front of me. This obviously is no longer necessary. It was asked. It's going to be funded naturally from a grant from the state of Connecticut, which we're all very happy about. But this was requested to go for the capital fund also. And let's see. So that's where we are with capital. That's not our money yet, but it means we don't have to spend our money on this if everything works correctly. It doesn't mean that if in fact we had surplus in our own budget for conversation's sake in this year, that we wouldn't also pick these same type of activities, maybe other ones. Moving on, things that don't get paid for, what's requested from the buildings and from the district and from department heads that don't get funded in the capital plan, we try to fold into the operating budget. The request for what we used to call site and building, and is still considered that from the town's level. It's for minor facilities development, maintenance to the district, things like that. Historically, as noted, the Board of Ed site and building requests were budgeted in the town budget, now need to be included in our BOE operating budget. It's problematic, unfortunately. It's not that we don't want to do it. It's problematic with the levels that we get and the expense of these items. The one thing I do have to say is, which some people do not know, is that in addition to funds provided by the Board of Ed operating budget, there are a number of funds provided to the town facility department. And some of these funds, a substantial amount of these funds, are available to be spent on our school facilities. So it's not like there's no other money other than ours. There's capital fund money, and then there's town general fund money that for facilities that are to be used, or at least a good portion of them to be used for the Board of Ed. So those are two things that we get without having it in our fund. Let me talk a little bit about the initial requests that would now have to go either in capital, which you've already heard what is going there, or would go into our general fund. Building district requests. These are smaller items that were put together. You have lists in your packets that show exactly what the buildings and the district requested, both in capital and in site. You can review those. I didn't want to go through them one by one, but give you an order of magnitude. We requested $126,000 for the buildings, and we requested another $387,000 out of the fire associates item. And just make sure here. I don't want to miss any of my comments here. Okay. So on the site and building requests, this is what we requested. The news that I'm really here to say is that the amount of funding proposed in the superintendent's budget at present for site and building and capital is $50,000. That's a far cry from what we requested, and most probably a far cry from what we need. It was necessary naturally to get down to the budget that we need to do at this point, and equipment, and in this case, site and building and capital items, because it's included in equipment and what we call other expenditures, would normally go in our budget there. We're hoping that we can take care of a lot of the requests if we do have any surplus this year, or if we do have any grant money. It's the kind of thing we've done in the last few years also, where equipment does get cut, and then we can take care of it, because equipment is the kind of expenditure that you can take care of at the end of the year. And so we anticipate doing a lot of things the superintendent has supported, and very important things and things that the principals have all requested. But currently you've got $50,000 in that budget line item. I think the ability in FY 21-22 for the Board of Ed to meet the needs for additional capital, site and building and equipment expenditures will have to be taken care of either in hopefully some surplus or unencumbered grants. Other than that, that's, I want to say, number one, I always appreciate the fact that everybody puts so much time into requesting the kind of improvements that we do need. There's a lot of things that have to happen in our schools. This does not mean at all the town doesn't support the best they can to keep our schools where they are and to put investment, but it's a huge amount of money, and it'll be a long time and a lot of changes before in our general operating budget we'll be able to take care of these, because the way the general operating budget happens, as you know, by the time you get through all the cuts and you get down to percentages and you get down to the things that we need to just operate and teach children, there's not a lot left for facilities. So we try our best. I will say one thing, the superintendent supports a tremendous amount of improvements to the facilities. We have a hard time putting them in the budget at the beginning of the budget period. Hopefully we can do better by the time the budget ends. That's what I have. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cugno, for going over the site and building. And now we'll be moving on to capital requests.
Stop share. I did it. Stop share. Go on.
I'll share your screen.
I did.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. This is Ashley Dorsey. I am the Director of Finance, and tonight I'm going to be talking about the district's request for technology as well as the proposed budget for our security department. Although we don't often get a chance to interact with these departments, as many of their job roles have them working behind the scenes, both departments are composed of a group of knowledgeable men and women who are dedicated to our students, staff, and the overall success of our district. The district prides itself in the ability to support learning through the use of different types of technology. As we continue to prioritize a one-to-one student technology model, the need for proper funding is essential. Historically, technology was not budgeted for in the operational budget. Purchases to the program were available through surplus or end-of-year funds, and under some circumstances, even some grant funding if it was available. In the more recent years, we have allocated minimal funding in our operational budget to fund things for technology, the technology department. So our Director of Technology, Craig Szymanski, requested over $1.6 million for the 2021-2022 school year. The amount can be broken down into 4 separate categories, including school or student hardware, district technology, infrastructure, software, and licensing and support. Student hardware refers to devices used to support the one-to-one technology model. Students are issued new Chromebooks when they enter grades 6 and 9. Chromebooks at the elementary level are used in grades 3 to 5, and iPads are used in grades K through 2. District technology refers to the type of technology used in the classroom. This includes items such as our smart boards, document cameras, computer labs within the schools, and etc. Also included in this category are staff devices, so that would be their laptops or their iPads. Of course, also in this category, that includes any kind of office technology, so our printers and scanners. And this fund also has funds available for the just day-to-day repair and maintenance of any technology throughout the district. The technology director is very conscious of equipment life cycles. He and his department members are dedicated to preserving the life cycle of all devices whenever possible. Many of the initial requests account for devices or equipment that are approaching their end of life cycle or reaching the end of their service agreements or warranties. $400,000 in infrastructure was requested to secure funding for an upgrade to a security camera system over at the high school. Over the past few years, we've installed a security camera system in all buildings, and it would be ideal to have a system that is uniform throughout the district. The system currently in place over at the high school is antiquated, and it lacks some of the analytics the newer camera system provides in the other buildings. The IT department also manages the district operating software. So that's our Power Schools, our iVisions, our Frontlines, and many more softwares that we use daily to ensure efficiency throughout the district. In this request, the IT director was also looking to purchase a new cybersecurity software to protect the district from any kind of potential threats we may be exposed to. Increasing our level of cybersecurity was also a suggestion in our latest audit, and holding a high standard for this type of security is an important initiative.
Ashley, can I ask a question before you go further?
Sure.
It's Adam Selena, board member, or maybe it's for Craig too. I know the security cameras. You're saying that the system is antiquated at the high school. I'll ask the question. I think a lot of people are thinking. I know we keep thinking about the high schools being brand new. I know it's not brand new anymore. But that being said, how is that? Are the security cameras original to the renovation and therefore antiquated after 6 or 7 years, or what makes them antiquated?
Currently, Craig Szymanski, IT director. The camera system at the high school was actually an evolution from the old before renovation. They might have like 30 to 40 cameras. Those were added to the new building, and then they added another 100 on top of that. The servers in the back end are the ones that were installed in 2014. They're, the storage capacity isn't as great as we need, and they're really end of life. And we've had a few that start failing over the last year or so. We've had to replace. And the main thing is how we've really invested a lot into McGee, and all the elementary schools are all on the same platform. And the cameras in those buildings have analytics which will identify noises of breaking glass, gunshots, screams, things like that. So like all those things can be actually detected by the newer devices, which the old system does not do. And it would, in the process of replacing all these cameras, which are, like we're looking at 2014, by the time they get replaced, they're going to have to be replaced in the next few years. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
And have we exhausted all of our security grant opportunities?
I would ask Jeff. Like, I know we were waiting on some.
Yeah, if I may, the state has not come out with a 5th round of security. We did get money in 1, 3, and 4. And have spent that money already. We're just waiting to close out and receive the reimbursement back from 1, but from the vestibules. But they have not come out with another round of grants. I don't know, Adam, if there's any grants straight federally. Most of those things come through the state. But again, I know they spoke about having another round, but I haven't seen anything.
All right, thank you, Craig. Thanks,
I could just add one note to that, Brian, being a superintendent. The cameras at the high school are proprietary, and in that, we're unable to have those cameras link. Eventually, the goal was to link them, and John Schmoltz is on also, he can speak to it, to link them to the police station. So if the police station ever wanted to remote in, that could take place. The high school cameras are not able to do that. So the proprietary means that when there's an issue, we're calling that company and that company exclusively to work on them, where our other cameras, we're able to work on them themselves with our IT or call in experts if need be. The other issue is the cameras at the high school, where you could have mobile access on a tablet or a phone. The high school cameras do not have that mobile access. So, those years from 2014 to now, things have changed greatly. There will be a cost savings once we purchase the cameras and not having them be proprietary to that one company. And the other thing is, Craig said, as they start failing, it's kind of like a catch-22. You're going back, you're having this company that you want to switch to, but you got to keep those cameras going. So, finding that kind of money in this budget will be very difficult, but, in a little bit, we're putting, good money after bad, if you know what I mean, because we know eventually it has to take place. It's kind of like the phone system we did last year. The town didn't have the money to upgrade it, but we're upgrading a system that was over 20 years old. To drop $10,000 to fix it or $15,000, you're better off spending the $40,000 and putting a new system in, and then moving forward, you're going to be in good standings for the next 10 years, hopefully. So it's similar with the cameras. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, as the superintendent mentioned in his presentation on Monday, we were very mindful of the current economic condition of the community in preparing the budget for next year. This resulted in significant cuts to the technology requests. The thought process is, in the event of any available surplus, we can allocate some of those funds to subsidize the technology budget. Although we do not anticipate a significant surplus at the end of this year, a well-managed budget will typically have approximately anywhere between 1 to 2.5% in surplus available. Additionally, in response to the COVID pandemic and efforts to support distance learning at the time, the district received 500 Chromebooks from the state of Connecticut, which helped offset a portion of the initial funding requested for the Chromebook budget. Although the superintendent's proposal for technology is lean in comparison to the anticipated needs of the district. We're grateful for any funding that we can allocate to technology that supports the needs of our students, teachers, and support staff. The security department is relatively new to the Berlin Public Schools. It was established in the school year of 2019-2020 school year. It has since then grown into a department of 6, including a security director and 5 armed security guards. The security department goes above and beyond ensuring the safety of our school community. They are dedicated to building relationships with students, staff, and families. They step in whenever asked, whenever we need any kind of additional hands, whether that being handing out Chromebooks in the middle of a pandemic or being there for crowd control when the cafeteria department is handing out lunches in the spring times when we had to go to full remote. The security department was there to support the district. They also help the district, any kind of district personnel and any kind of residency issues or anything else that may come up along the way.
Tell you the name of that book Auntie Lori told me about? What's the name of it, Laura?
Dog Man?
Scott's Dog or something?
Dog Man.
Dog Man.
Oh yeah, I don't.
Ms. Jerpin, could you please mute yourself?
So the department is truly a tremendous resource to the district, and we are fortunate to be part of a community that supports this type of program within our school. So although the department is funded by the town of Berlin, the board is responsible for preparing their budget. This table represents what we have requested for funding for the next fiscal year. The salary lines include wage increases and anticipated overtime costs. The requests for other professional services include professional development like PMT training or any kind of state certification our armed guards are required to renew annually. The budget for contracted services includes funding for a TransUnion service, which we use for background checks and any kind of residency issues. And of course, we allocate minor funding for miscellaneous supplies to support the efficiency within their offices, as well as requesting funding for their uniforms and their duty equipment, which includes firearms and ammunition. Does anybody have any questions about technology or security at this time?
All right, well, thank you so much, Ashley, for that presentation. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Superintendent Benigni for item H, Board of Education overall review.
I think that going back to the presentation Monday night, I think even more so now, you can see that the majority of the budget increase is staff and contractual benefits. There's not a lot outside of that at all. And as I said the other night, it's roughly 500 some odd thousand, or a little more than 1%. I think it's 1.1%. That is to preserve the staff and the programs that we currently have in place. But as you can see, there's a plethora of other things that we need funding for that are not in this budget. And those decisions being made of staff and programs over waiting and hoping that there are additional grants, that we do have some excess issue that we can put towards equipment, and preserving the staff and the programs and the class sizes that people have come to expect. And for that really was the rationale of why the budget. But I think tonight was a great opportunity to look a little further inside of what's really was there that's not there now. And I think the administration, I want to thank you for doing that in that way. And the board, you've always asked and want to know what's not being funded. And I think you got a great picture of that tonight. I do think, though, over the last 2 years, we did add some important positions: social workers, lead teachers, additional staff, K paras. and this year, I think with what everyone's dealing with, it's going to be a difficult year in funding. And so, I look forward to moving forward with all of you giving input on your thoughts in the upcoming weeks before the budget moves forward as the Board of Education adopted budget, not the superintendents. But as I said, with my goals, we're really preserving staff and programs, and that and we took some deep cuts to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank Superintendent Benigni, all of your staff, your administrators, everyone here this evening that had a part in putting this together, from all of administration. And, it was obviously very thorough. I think the materials in Schoology will be a great reference for us to then go back to as we go through prior to our Monday, January 25th meeting. I have one question, one ask. I'm not sure if this is possible, but prior to our Monday, January 25th meeting, that is a budget discussion workshop. Would we be able to receive a breakdown from basically items A through G on the percentage that they are asking for? Like what percentage of the budget is it? And also what percentage increase from last year to this year, or maybe over the past 3 years? I just think, I know there's some schools that have greater needs than others. For instance, McGee, like every year we are trying to provide McGee with everything we can do. Same with last year when we went through the walkthrough in Griswold. I think it will provide us as a Board of Education a better understanding of percentages of where the money is possibly getting dispersed, and then we can advocate better for it, as well as for our facilities and curriculum and instruction. Dr. McGurk's budget, I think, really honed in on that with the spreadsheet, but that was a while ago at this point. So I don't know, Brian, is that a possibility? Could we get something like that?
Well, what I'll try to do is give you, with the help, obviously, of the business office, with Ashley and Jeff and John, I'll try to give you going back 3 years so you can see what the trend was. So what did McGee get for equipment last year, what they get the year before, and what's anticipated this year? So you can see at least a 3-year look back. Would that work?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that, one school gets more money than other schools. Obviously, McGee's need is going to be more significant than Berlin High School's based on the building. But that's also going to be important for us moving forward down the road to say, every year this building is costing us this, and then we can advocate at a better level. So I think it will just also be a good way for us to analyze the needs, especially moving forward.
Yeah, I think the other part, I think it would be good to show it in totality. So how much was there in the equipment? And you see that on the summary page.
Right.
Broken out. I mean, we can go back multiple years, but this budget here, I can tell you, looking back at previous budgets, is definitely a greater amount, or the focus is on staff and programs and very little on equipment and tangibles.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, this budget year, you did a great job at coming in at 4.6 roughly. That's pretty low in comparison to previous years, and anticipating the impact on the economy from COVID, next year might be an even more challenging year. So if we can start really equipping ourselves at a higher capacity, I think that will serve us as a board well, but also serve us, serve the schools and the community. So right now for the board, my ask of you is to please take time to go through the budget binder that was dropped off. It should make a lot more sense now that we've had our Monday meeting as well as this evening. Also go through all the presentations in Schoology. Feel free to reach out to Brian and myself with any questions, and be prepared for more budget in 2 weeks. Brian, do you have anything you'd like to add about our meeting in 2 weeks?
No, I think if there's anything that people would like as they look through the budget documents, to reach out to you, Julia, and you'll inform me of what you'd like, prepared. And then we'll do our best to get that for you. So if there's
So I think the best next step would be any questions or anything else you would like, just send it to me. And then I will make sure that I'm communicating with Brian as we prepare for the next meeting. There may be a lot of questions that come up as, you take this, what we went through Monday, this evening, and really digest it, but that is my ask of the board members. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you everyone in attendance tonight for your time. I know it was not, a short meeting, but it was a very important meeting. So we have one more agenda item.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have a discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Al, you don't get a vote.
What'd you say?
I said Al doesn't get a vote. He's just waving goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, bye Al. Have a great night. Everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. The motion carries 8-0. And thank you for a wonderful meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.